Hello, investors. This is Ted Zhang, portfolio manager at Revere Asset Management. Today is Friday, August 8th, 4:57 p.m., coming to you from Vienna, Virginia, with tonight's Revere Roundup Daily Market Insight video. State of the market, we're still in the uptrend. Market leaders with a green up arrow. Short term, we still have yet moved the trend to a green up arrow because the IWM, small caps, mid caps, and Dow are lagging. However, we do have a green sub arrow though, if they do resolve themselves to the upside. A medium term trend, green with an up arrow, long term trend all above the 200-day moving averages, so an up arrow as well. So we're getting close to the four coveted green arrows, but not quite yet. What happened today? S&P gapped up and closed at all-time, or it closed at highs of the week. 21 over 21 list, up 0.27%. 13 up to neutral, 6 down. Turbo 12 down 1.56%. 4 up, 8 down. Cecil down 35% on earnings. And we had some other ones destroyed by earnings this week as well, like SMCI and TSSI. This is just a reminder that earnings can be filled with landmines. Even a stock that's made a huge move can come all the way back down to earth just on one bad earnings report. And we'll definitely go over some of those stocks later. Big eight up a 1.81%. This continues to be a mega cap led market. As you can see, it's the greenest index that we track right now. RG8 up a minuscule 0.12%, pretty much flat. S&P up 0.78%. RSP up 0.18%. Qs up 0.93%. QQEW down 0.14%. Dow Jones up 0.47%. Midcaps up down 0.01%. Small caps, Russell up 0.17%. Global 60/40 equity bonds up 0.41%. GROTECTION up 0.99%. And Turbo up 0.72%. One caveat here at the Big A is that Apple is up 11% in the last 3 days and up over 4% today. So jumping right into a chart of the S&P 500, starting right here. One second. As you can see, last week we had the hawkish Fed followed by poor reactions to Apple and Amazon earnings. That led to bearish engulfing and a gap down, closing below the 21 EMA. But we quickly reclaimed the 21 EMA a day later, chopped around above the 21 in between the 8 and the 21. And so far, we continue to float higher. We're starting to contend with that reversal level. So that will definitely be key. And we'll see what happens at the 6,400 area, which we have yet to reclaim so far. RSP, definitely relative weakness here below the 821 and living many days below the 821 now, contrasting with the S&P. We quickly reclaimed the 21 EMA, which the equal weighted RSP has failed to do so far. We're looking at the 8 cross below the 21 EMA now, both declining, and we'll see what happens at the 50-day. Q's extra strong because of mega caps. And actually, let's see, highs 574.63, 574.77. So the Q's actually made a new all-time high after this pullback shake, and we're gapping up another 23 basis points after hours. So Q's all-time high after this recent debacle. However, equal weighted Qs showing extreme relative weakness. Can't even reclaim the 8 or the 21, while Qs are making new all-time high. The QQEW is looking to break the 50-day moving average. So there's definitely a disparity between the Big 10 and the rest of the S&P 500, or the Big 10 and the Nasdaq versus the rest of the Nasdaq 90. Dow Jones Industrial Average kind of just chopping around, bearish engulfing candle yesterday, right at the 8 and 21 EMA. Mid caps, similar to RSP and QQEW, below the 8 and 21, with the 8 crossing below the 21. Small caps chopping right at the 8 and 21. Kind of looks more like the Dow. This is why we have the short-term trend. Still at a neutral, but with a green sub-arrow. Of course, S&P and the Nasdaq are greater weightings in our trend determination. VIX continues to sink lower, almost back to the 15 handle. We quickly rejected 20 and are back at this low volatility territory, which is really great for trend followers like us. Dollar, not too much to say here. We continue lower, back below all key moving averages. We rejected the 100 UNR. Gold, GLD did not make a new all-time high, but the futures did. Uh, this looks really good though, as Trump levies some tariffs on gold, which cause a spike in the future prices. Silver looks great. Reclaimed the 821, held the 50. And then on to Bitcoin. We'll go to a chart here. Bitcoin looks amazing, although it has been lagging the S&P the last few weeks. This is really setting up a perfect base on base pattern. See this perfect cup with handle. We broke out, formed another. This is about to be a 4-week base on the 10-week moving average, following declining. Now on the daily, you can see there's this down declining tops trend line right here. And we had this wedge pop yesterday above the 821. 5, actually, this is the, 8 and 21 right here. And we'll see what happens. Inside day right now, and this weekend could lead to a breakout. It's pressing right up against the declining tops trend line right now. Ethereum is extremely strong. Broke out of this flag above the 8 and 21, and we're right now pressing up against this 4,100 level. My expectation is that it does reject. It's been a huge level of resistance, and recently we saw a 65% pullback and now a 200% move off the lows. There's still a 1,000 point gap between the 10-week and current price. There's a about 500 point gap between the 10-week and the lows of this recent flag, if you will. So my expectation is that we do find resistance in this 4,100 area. Maybe we overshoot to this 4,400 resistance, which goes back all the way to 2021 and build a flag. But the key is that, as you can see, going a weekly, the MAs are not aligned. The 20 is not above the 30, but we are above the 10 and 30, which are rising. So that's a great sign, but huge price gap, and that usually leads to some back and fill. Of course, nothing is definitive. This can always overshoot with the momentum it has, but that is what I am expecting as an expectation. Other great, and just an indication, you can see that there's some really big crypto bases on the weekly chart. You can look at Bitcoin, broke out this cup with handle, now base on base pattern. You can look at Ethereum, huge 4-year base. You can see that. Solana, also huge base, really since 2021, but let's just say since 2024, 1-year base. XRP, huge, pretty much 1-year base now, about 9-month base, cup handle, looking really good. And they just resolved their SEC lawsuit, but that is done now. And volume patterns are perfect. Accumulation after the election, huge volume during the space, absolutely no volume, completely dried up. And you can see it shook out to the 40-week, found support, and got extremely tight here. So this looks great. And then it ran up into like it ran up into Congress passing the Clarity, the Genius, and Anti-CBDC Act. So that looks really good. The MA's all pressed up against that level. That looks amazing. Another one I want to showcase is its sister, XLM. Similar pattern here as well. Big cup with handle. Seems a little bit weaker than XRP. See, XRP held the 40-week. XLM actually broke below the 40-week. But after this move up higher, it looks amazing with that maze right below and starting to align as well and building a cup with handle. SWI, another big weekly base that I'm watching. And this is just really an indication that crypto is forming huge ranges and potentially can break out. This is the total crypto market cap at 3.85 trillion. Of course, Bitcoin over 2.4 of that, 2.4 trillion. Another cup with handle breakout and now base on base pattern as well, right on top of previous all-time highs. So this looks really great for crypto land. And with that said, I'm going to finish off with the yields. 10-year rose 3.7 basis points today. That means bonds sold off. 2-year also rose about 4 basis points, with the 2-year selling off. And that is it for the inter-asset correlation. I'm going to head to the tail of the tape now. Sentiment, as we talked about, almost back to 15. Senior fear and greed up to 59 plus 4. Operating in the bull case now as we're back above the 21 EMA. The main news today was NP, Rocket Lab, soon, TEM earnings, and they all had, NP had nice earnings. They beat on earnings and they beat on revenues. Rocket Lab missed on earnings but beat on revenues. Soon beat on earnings and revenues and guided higher. And then TEM beat on earnings and revenues. So those are some of the highlights from earnings today. Day count down 1 to up 1. 3 days above the 8 EMA, 5 days above the 21 EMA. Short-term expectations are positive. Strong sectors today. Volumes are up and bonds are down. Dollar was up. Tech, financials, and healthcare. Copper was up. Mag 7 were extremely strong, and regional banks. On the downside, real estate with rates higher, some with utilities were down. Software, and then cybersecurity and Bitcoin were down, but Bitcoin is the inside day, so that's great action. In GROTECTION, we added to MP. Don used one of his pullback buy opportunities just to sneak in a little more after this earnings. And that leaves us at 1.42 beta, 6.5% open heat. In Turbo, we took a starter in Tesla. You can see this declining tops trend line. They're still in a range right now. We have this 338 to contend with, 357 and 367. And those will be levels that we'll look to build into. And we're really just, it's a really tight chart right now on the weekly. You can see this cup with handle, super, super tight. And when you have tightness like that on the weekly, especially the weekly, when the moving averages have converged so tight with horrible news, you see earnings declining, the worst of the worst news, but Tesla refuses to head lower and it continues to build higher lows. That is a sign that institutions are accumulating and the bad news is all factored in. All the earnings deceleration, revenue deceleration, as as institutions are looking forward to robotaxi revenue streams, maybe humanoids as well. And then we also bought SOUN, which saw an earnings gap, 25% year-over-year earnings, 68% year-over-year revenue, 217% year-over-year revenues. We had surprises on both, and this gapped out of that range, but more importantly, it gapped out of this horizontal range as well. So that looks good. And previously, historically, when Soon has news, it can make some quite linear moves. So that is what I am watching for. Continuing on, well, actually, let's go over the betas. Grows 1.42 beta, 6.5% open heat. Turbo 1.82 beta, 6.24% open heat. Bottom line is S&P gap up and closed at highs of the week. Monday's keys, we're still watching S&P versus the 821 all-time high. Qs, what we're watching versus the 821 and all-time high, which we did make, and Russell versus the 21 EMA and 50-day. So that is it for the tail of the tape. Let's go over those earnings charts real quick. Soon was one we bought, like I said. NP's one Grow and Dawn added to. Rocket Lab we didn't touch. That gapped up and then squatted and closed lows of the day. And then TEM also squatted and closed lows. So earnings has been really mixed. There has been a lot of earnings being sold into or just earnings that completely led to the downside. So we still aren't getting aggressive in earnings plays, especially gap ups, but it's got to stay very selective at the end of the day. Contributing to the medcap strength was Apple, up over 4% today. This reclaimed the 200-day moving average since the start of the tariff wars. This has been amazing. Tim Cook went to the Oval Office, gifted Trump a Apple manufacturing in America trophy made out of 24 karat gold. So that definitely helps with Apple expecting less tariffs on their products. That is boosting its stock tremendously. You can see the volumes coming into the stock on the weekly, huge volume. You can see there's more and more accumulation on the weekly for Apple. And now you can see the accumulation coming into the daily as well. So we went over Grow and Turbo, bank account, and earnings. Now I'll cover 21 over 21 list. Let's just go over the top 5 names and the top 5 losers, and then we'll go over Turbo 12, and then we'll wrap it up for this week's last video. A-Lab continues to be so strong. Inside day after the gap, and we took out the highs of the inside day. MP, already talked about this. APP, amazing earnings strength as well. Broke out of that downtrend line and this horizontal line after 153% year-over-year earnings, 77% year-over-year revenues, and we had 16% earnings surprise as well. Robinhood makes a new all-time high out of this flag. Amazing action. 100% year-over-year earnings, 45% year-over-year revenues. Palantir continues just to float higher after earnings. This just shows that a stock that seems high can continue higher. You can see first earnings that we ever saw came out of the stage 4 downtrend. You can see below all the key moving averages, 10, 20, 30, 40, chops around, build the stage 1 base, and that's where the moving averages catches up the price, flattens, and enters an uptrend. And really, the 40-week moving average has contained this entire move the entire way. Just amazing. From $8 to almost $200 now. Reddit also continues to flow higher after earnings. So as you can see, it's been quite mixed. Palantir, Reddit, and some of these other names are doing well on earnings as others get torched or sold into. This is really separating the wheat from the chaff. You can see 850% year-over-year earnings, 78% year-over-year revenue growth. This is acting perfect, and it's heading into this 230 area now. STX reclaims a 21 EMA up 1.6%, and that's the top 5 movers in 21 over 21. DraftKings, huge volatility, breaks the 21. That's a no-go zone now. That's one that broke the 21. Dash went higher on earnings, pulled back in. Again, the mixed nature of earnings right now. Rocket Lab pulled back into the 8 EMA, down 4.2% today. Carvana down 2.9%, breaking the 8 and the 21. Pretty much back to the 50-day. I don't like this action where earnings get sold into and quickly breaks the lows of earnings day. Net breaking the 8 EMA after yesterday's bearish engulfing. And then VST is down as well, breaking the 8, but still holding the 21. And we had an upside reversal yesterday. So this looks still pretty good. In Turbo 12, the big hit was Cecil. Still 97% year-over-year earnings and 76% year-over-year revenue growth. But again, growth is all about future expectations. When you have triple digits or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in a row, and same with triple digit revenues and high double digits, when you start seeing deceleration in earnings, especially nominally, that's when you have bad moves. It's just institutions believing that the growth story might be over on this one. TSSI was another earnings crapper. Really nothing you can do about this. This will be removed off the Turbo 12. Same with Tesla. AMSC down 6% today after earnings. This is coming back in, but still holding the lows. Broke the 8 EMA, but the 21 has caught up as well. Hinge Health pulling back in after its earnings gap. This is still acting fine. No earnings, but 55% revenue growth. AVAV cracks the 21 EMA back to the 50-day. That will be removed. SMCI also crapped on earnings, missed on earnings. Negative 8% surprise. Revenues are down the toilet as well. So this will be off as well. Galaxy continues to act fine, a little bit choppy, building a high handle. And Viking breaking the 21 EMA as well. On the upside, aerospace defense name on earnings gaps up and closes at all-time high. SYM's coming back after earnings gap down, and the SCDG is right at the 21 EMA and might break as well. So with that being said, nice bounce back on the S&P 500, almost into new all-time highs. Nasdaq composite into new all-time highs. Qs into new all-time highs as well. And Bitcoin watching it closely for a breakout next week. So with that being said, I'm going to wrap it up for today's video. If you're interested in what we do and have any questions, you can email me at ted@revereasset.com. I do want to remind the viewers, you should have gotten an email from Dan, and we reminded everyone on the podcast that when GROTECTION reaches 400 million, this is GROTECTION, we are closing it down and we'll open a new strategy for even more liquid stocks, replacing the smaller stocks we take in GROTECTION with an ETF strategy. That's just a heads up. If you want to get any extra money in that you haven't yet, please contact Dan, Muriel, or Don, and we'll help you take care of that process for you. My Twitter and X is TedHZang. My phone is 855 Real Wealth. That is 855-732-5932. Our website is revereasset.com. YouTube, X, Instagram, and TikTok is at Revere Asset. Please like, share, and subscribe if you enjoy our content. And with that being said, I'm going to wrap it up for today's video and this week's last video. This is Ted Zhang with Revere Asset Management, telling it like it is. Thank you for listening and have a great rest of your week.